So much for joining us for the Total Security Solutions Fundamentals of School Security webinar. We're about to get started here. So before we do that, I'd like to just remind you that the slides and resources from today's presentation will be emailed to you by the end of the day. At this time, I'd just like to offer a quick reminder of how we're going to handle the question and answers for today's webinar. Right now, we've muted the phone lines to avoid any interference from background noise, and we'll keep them that way during the presentation. You can feel free to submit any questions on an ongoing basis during the webinar using the questions function on the right-hand panel of your screen. We'll attempt to get to as many questions as we can during the presentation, and we also have a little Q&A section at the end where we'll address any questions. So my name is Marissa Smith, and I'm here today with Jim Richards, the Vice President of Total Security Solutions. Today's webinar is focused on how to determine your school safety needs and how to enhance security with bullet-resistant barriers. Today we're going to take a little bit of a different approach to a traditional webinar. Typically there's a standard presentation with somebody just kind of talking, but we decided that we would take more of an interview style to keep things a little bit more interesting. So before we get started, I'll give you just a little bit of an introduction to Jim Richards. Jim, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So Jim is the Vice President of Total Security Solutions, and he is our most experienced team member here at TSS. He's got over 10 years of experience in the bullet-resistant barrier industry. He and his dad started the company in 2004 as a family business, and they've now grown it to almost 30 employees now. And you know, the big differentiator here at TSS is that we really like to work very closely with our customers to make sure they have the right education and resources to make good decisions for their security needs. So Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit more about TSS?
Yeah, here at Total Security Solutions, we're a custom manufacturer of bullet-resistant barriers. We specialize in the design, engineering, and manufacturing of those products. We manufacture everything in-house here. We have a full-line acrylic and glass department. We have a full-line mill shop. We have an aluminum department that fabricates and assembles bullet-resistant frames and doors. And we also have an extensive steel and stainless steel capabilities here. We manufacture everything here in Fowlerville, Michigan. We're currently under 25,000 square feet of manufacturing space. And we also have national coverage of installation capabilities.
Great.
A little bit about the Total Security Solutions team. Over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we've steadily been growing. We currently have 4 full-time engineers. We have an inside sales department here located in Fowlerville, Michigan. We have outside salespeople that cover the country. And we do all our own manufacturing and installations out of our Fowlerville, Michigan location.
Great, thanks for that introduction. So as everybody on the call is probably familiar, there have been a lot of unfortunate incidents recently with regard to school security, and there's been quite a bit of national attention from politicians and educators and parents. And you know, with all of that activity, we here at Total Security Solutions have seen just a lot of inquiries from people all over the place asking about how to get started and what they should be worried about. And so, Jim, why don't you take us through a little bit what we've seen here with regard to school security since these recent events?
You know, since the last major incident at Sandy Hook there, the first couple weeks to, I'd say, the first month, maybe month and a half, our phone rang off the hook. Between web leads and phone calls, we were probably fielding 50 to 75 requests daily. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of people wanting to gather as much information, and those initial early calls were from parents, grandparents, teachers, anything that they were looking to just protect and have an immediate solution. We realized that real quick that wasn't going to be a viable long-term solution, so we started engaging architects, contractors, other people that we could pull into this and look for partnerships in areas where we could build some relationships and get out information that was valuable to those people.
We've seen quite a lot of misinformation, I guess, out there too as people are calling in. Why don't you take our listeners through some of those, the challenges and what people are facing?
Well, the biggest thing that we saw is that a lot of this hadn't been done before in schools. The security upgrades that people are looking to do today was new to, I guess, what I would call public schools. Over the course of the last few years, we've been doing a lot more of this work for schools and private schools and protecting the areas in there, but it was a relatively new product for schools. So they didn't understand the time budgets, the cost budgets, the actual material itself, how it functions, how it can be integrated into the existing environment. And one of the challenges that we saw immediately is that obviously every school is different, even in an individual school district. We looked at locations, and there might be 8 schools in a district. Some of them are older schools, some of them have been renovated, some of them are brand new. So the key is, how do you get these products to fit in each one of those locations and fit in there seamlessly so that people don't know that you're putting in bullet-resistant barriers.
So there's no barrier in a box,
exactly,
all-in-one kit that people can just order with a credit card.
Exactly.
Right. We're coming up with all kinds of ways that they thought they could pay for such things too. Why don't you tell us about some of the things you've heard?
We had people that wanted to do, obviously, the cookie drives and the bake sales and the frozen pizzas. There was a real misconception of what these products cost. Bullet-resistant barriers are not cheap. The glazing itself is relatively expensive. The frames that we supply are bullet-resistant as well. If we're doing millwork, or we've been doing some kiosk work where, like a reception desk, we'll make that bullet-resistant as well. So there's usually a big sticker shock with people that aren't used to working with this product.
Great, thank you. So, I know we've seen a lot of people coming in saying, we need the highest level of protection available. And why don't you talk a little bit about what that looks like and what misconceptions are out there too?
There's a big misconception in our industry, or in the bullet-resistant product industry, because when people do their initial search on the internet, or they look around, they see that UL has 8 levels of protection. Level 1's the lowest level of protection, and level 8's the highest. We've been at this in this business for 10 years, and overall we have probably 30, 35 years of experience in different businesses that we've been in, and it's pretty uncommon to go above level 4 protection. Level 3 is more common in municipalities. We'll look at that later, but one of the biggest complications that we saw early on is that obviously children are considered an asset, and people want to protect them, and we had a lot of requests for people wanting level 7 glass, level 8 glass. It didn't matter to them. They wanted the most protection they could get. Those products are found in embassies and extremely sensitive governmental projects. So it took a lot of education for these people, explaining what is realistic and what is acceptable protection for this product.
Right. Well, and you don't want the children to feel like they're going into an embassy or to scare people off with over-the-top solutions. So, and on the flip side, though, we're also seeing some people who are almost under-protecting, or are, trying to squeeze a solution into a very tiny budget that's not quite a fit for what they're trying to accomplish. So why don't you talk about that a little bit too?
We've seen that kind of across the board with anything, whether it's a tragedy, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's something like this that occurred, or whether it's just an uptick in crime. There's always people that want to capitalize, I guess, on this. And we've seen a lot of consultants. We've seen a lot of people pop up that don't have experience working with these products or working in this industry, and with that, there's a lot of things that aren't known. So we've seen an influx in requests for films. We've seen an influx in requests for non-rated frames and, I guess material that can not be broken through but still isn't bullet resistant. And so we've tried to do the best we can to just educate the customers that, there's not a lot of point in putting in bullet resistant glass. If you put them in frames that can't long-term structurally hold them, that the doors won't, hang up to the weight of that material. And the only real advantage of putting a film on something is keeping somebody from maybe breaking that glass. And if they hit it enough, they're still going to get through it regardless. So we've been trying to, I wouldn't say be as patient as we can, but just make sure that we educate those customers and those potential customers that, if this is the route you want to go, there's definite downside to that.
And if you want high-level protection, there's an investment.
There's a definite investment that's required.
Okay, great. So you mentioned before, too, that, sometimes when people are planning, they're not thinking about the structural implications of this, of a barrier. It's not necessarily as simple as just, cutting a hole in the wall and putting a bulletproof window in where a glass window was before. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about?
This is where we've had a lot of success bringing in architects into this equation at this point. There's a lot of things that aren't known about bullet-resistant products. The sheer weight of the glass can be anywhere from 8 to 16 pounds a square foot. The doors themselves can weigh 250 to 350 pounds, depending on the level of protection. And a lot of these older schools might not have been structurally designed to support that material. And so it's key, and we've done some of it, gone out and visit locations, but it's also been beneficial to have architects that have been engaged by the school districts to be brought in and look at these things ahead of time. So as part of the planning process, they can determine, okay, this wall needs to be reinforced. This soffit needs to be reinforced so that the material can be anchored in the proper places. So all those things need to be looked at because ultimately at the end of the day you want this thing to look and feel like it was part of the existing environment. You want the doors to be able to operate normally so that you can have a child be able to push that door open and not have a problem swinging those doors, and they close seamlessly. And if they're not anchored properly or structurally into those older buildings, then you get material that's swaying or warping or the frames bow. So we're just trying to avoid all those things.
And I know we'll get into this a little bit more later, but aesthetically, too, having an architect involved can be helpful so that you don't have a super modern looking entrance in a, older school building or, something that looks kind of cheap in a, really slick entrance and that sort of thing. So matching those things can be important from a design perspective as well. Exactly.
You want to match the existing facade as close as possible. We do a lot of painting, kind art painting, powder coating. We've even done some wood cladding just to make that existing environment match what we're putting in there, or what we're putting in there matching that existing environment. You want the millwork to match the existing millwork that's surrounding, and so it's important that you have somebody that's policing what's getting put in there, because it's not always conveyed by other people in this industry that there are options out there, that we can match whatever color paint is there previously. We can, if they're wanting to do a full upgrade, we can match if it's a new color they want to pick. Whatever it is, those things are options, and they're available to people out there.
And particularly in a school, it's important for that entranceway or anything to feel welcoming, and for it not to, stick out or feel strange to visitors who are coming into the building. Whereas maybe in a police station, you want to intimidate people. That's not necessarily what you want to do in a school. So,
exactly.
So we've been throwing around a lot of terms of, fiberglass and framing and all of this other stuff, and we thought it might be helpful to show a diagram of what a typical bullet-resistant barrier, can look like. Obviously, there's hundreds of different configurations, and what we specialize in here is custom barriers. But, Jim, maybe you could just walk people through what the common components are of a barrier so people are understanding of what the usage is of each component and what the importance is.
When we talk of a barrier, it can be anything from a bank teller line to a transaction window in a wall to a curtain wall system that you may see in a school or an entryway to this kind of vestibular kiosk here that's drawn. And the components of that, obviously you start with the transparency, and that's what we call, or a lot of people call, bulletproof glass. And that's anything that you're going to see through. That's the vision part. And that can be in multiple different materials, from acrylics to polycarbonates to glass-clad polycarbonates to actual glass itself. And then at some point in time you have to be able to talk through that material. Whether it's a window or what we have drawn here is just a hole and backer. There's a hole in the glass with a backer that goes over top of it. You can have electronic communication put in there. You can have a little window. There's any multitude of options that you can do to communicate, but at the end of the day you need to be able to communicate through that piece of glass, but yet still have the protection of the bullet-resistant material. When we talk about fiberglass, it's bullet-resistant fiberglass is a hard, rigid panel that's made out of fiberglass cloth that's pressed into almost like a sheet of plywood. And that is installed. That's used is because the glass is so expensive that it's more of a cost advantage to integrate the fiberglass into areas where it's not needed to be able to see through. So typical application is walls, doors, under counters, anything like that, ceilings, countertops. We'll integrate that fiberglass in there to make that product bullet resistant. Doors, you can have entryway doors that are like a typical aluminum style door. That can be bullet resistant. We make a full vision acrylic door. We make steel doors with any multitude of vision options in them, from 12 by 12 to 30 by 20 to, or 20 by 30 to full vision doors that are made out of steel. We make wood doors, and in the past couple of years we've integrated all kinds of different hardware into those doors. We have multiple options of hardware, panic devices, exit devices, access control, card readers. All those can be integrated into the doors as well. And then the last but not least is the ballistic framing, and I think that this is what separates us in the industry. We're one of just a few people out there that actually go as far as making sure that the aluminum itself is bullet resistant. And our kind of thought process is that people spend a tremendous amount of money for the glass itself, and it should be a requirement that the frames that hold the glass are bullet resistant and the doors themselves are bullet resistant as well. I think we feel that that's a key component to the makeup of the system, is making sure that when you have that entryway, whether it's in a government building, a municipality, or a school, that the entire product that you're putting in there is bullet resistant.
Right, because people aren't necessarily going to take time to aim at the glass, right? You know, you want to make sure that there's no vulnerabilities there as well. And, you know, with the voice systems you mentioned, there's also an element of something called a package passer or something like that that could also be part of that transaction window. So if you want to pass papers back and forth or packages, are those bullet resistant as well, typically? Typically
they are. Yeah, we make a multitude of different passers that are bullet resistant as well. And the whole concept behind there is that you don't want any breach of security at any time. So whether it's somebody wanting to pass some bulk coin, or we make little currency trays or slide drawers that are bullet resistant as well, so that people can pass clipboards, papers, whatever they need through those and still maintain that security.
Right. You know, Jim, we have a question from the audience here. Jackie is asking us what the ballistic frames are made out of. What material is that typically made out of?
You know, what we commonly sell are either hollow metal frames that are lined with either high hard steel or fiberglass, or we have our aluminum framing system, which is just an all aluminum frame that's extruded thick enough that the aluminum itself will stop the bullet. So those are the two most common frames that we offer. We make those, the hollow metal ones can be made in various sizes because we're actually making those and bending those and welding those together.
Sorry, I just had a technical difficulty there. Sorry about that. We had another question from the audience, and it's a well-timed question, asking about what level of resistance you typically recommend for schools. And your question is perfectly timed because we're about to hit that slide. So Jim, why don't you tell us about the different levels of resistance and what we typically recommend in school settings?
What we found has been most prevalent in schools, colleges, universities, has been that level 3 protection. And a level 3 will stop 3 shots of a 44 Magnum or a 12 gauge shotgun. And when I talk about 3 shots, that's in an extremely small area at a close range when they're doing these tests. And all these products are tested, sent out to independent labs, and shot as an assembly. Level 1 is the lowest level of protection, and that's typically would be found in a convenience store, a gas station, hotels, things like that. Level 2 we typically install in more of a larger financial institution environment, major banks, things like that. When you get into level 3, that's where we've commonly used this product in schools. Police stations are commonly done there. A lot of governmental, payment offices, utility offices, water treatment facilities, anything like that is typically level 3. For us, level 4 is about as high as we typically go. We've gone to level 5, 6, 7, and 8 and done projects. But when you get into level 4, that's a single shot of a 30-06, which is an extremely powerful rifle. And those products typically aren't used in violent crimes. When you look at crimes and how they take place and what people use with them, it's usually those lower level of protection of what people are stopping and wanting to stop, because ultimately you want to keep somebody out, you want to keep the people in and keep them protected until somebody can get there to help. So for us, level 3 has been what we've been installing in schools, and it seems to be effective.
And the higher levels are also typically cost prohibitive for school districts as well. And with the budget crunches and everything, you don't want to overshoot by installing something that is really over the top for what their needs are.
Yeah, when you start getting into the level 7 and level 8, that's stuff that you usually see in embassies, and you're looking at glass that's 2 inches thick that weighs 20-some pounds a square foot, and just sheer cost of the glass itself is astronomical for what people are expecting it's going to be. And then you run into issues, you run into extreme structural issues, you run into moving the material around, getting it in location, getting it installed. You're looking at doors that are weighing 400 to 500 pounds themselves. Then you got to look at options of having assists, helping open and close them. And it's just, for the threat level and the protection that's gained, and it's not advantageous.
Right. So, really what we need to talk about then is what is the most sensible security solution for a school. There's these extremes that people have the urge to go to sometimes, but when it comes down to it, you just need to use common sense and, have a sensible solution. So what do you typically recommend to people?
When we started this, the work we had been doing before the last incident was for private schools, we had always secured the vestibules. And that's typically with like a double entryway system. You have the exterior doors, then you have another set of doors on the interior, and then in between those is either a reception desk that's maybe open where somebody sits there and they check in, or you have a window, an operable window, or a transaction window in a block wall or a drywall wall. People walk in the outside doors, they check in, whatever the procedure that school has in policy, and then that person is buzzed in or let in. Some of the private schools that we use, they actually get the student or whatever, and they bring them out to that person. There's a lot of different things and a lot of different procedures and policies that schools themselves have. And, we've also found that a lot of schools don't even have those plans or haven't gone through that part. So we look at the barriers as just one aspect of that, securing that facility. How they handle their procedures, we don't really help them with that, but obviously there's a need to make sure that those people have those procedures and policies and things that they're doing in place. There's no really need to spend this money for a double entryway system and a transaction window if they leave the doors unlocked during the day and people can just walk in.
Or prop them open with a brick. Yeah. Right? Because it's annoying or something to have them closed, right?
They don't lock them or they don't whatever. So our systems are just one component of whatever that process is or that policy is. But we've been installing these, like you see on the slide, the picture there, the double entryway systems relatively often in these school environments. Right.
And I know you mentioned something about horizontal slider windows as being a pretty common, for the reception area so that they can open it and pass a package out. But you've found that people sometimes leave those open, and that's a security threat as well.
That's a security breach.
Right.
Yep.
Great. So why don't we walk through kind of the top 4 elements of a secure school barrier. We've been showing some pictures on these slides, and as we said before, we'll share these slides with you as well so that you can see some of the different configurations that are possible and why there are different school environments. Each one requires a different solution. But what are kind of the common components that you think people should really be aware of when they're planning for these projects?
You're going to start out with the basics, and those are going to be the frames, glazing, and doors typically. You're going to have a ballistic rated level 3 frame, and that's going to be kind of in a makeup of a curtain wall system. You're going to integrate, typically it's 1 set or 2 sets of double doors, and those people are going to walk through those and whatever hardware that school district is using or chooses to use. We have people that we partner with, but we've also found that it's worked well that we just provide the materials, we prep the frames and the glazing for whatever hardware they're going to be integrating, and then everything in the school district stays the same. Once you get inside those doors, typically maybe that interior wall is lined with fiberglass. You have a drywall or block opening. If it's a block wall, then obviously you don't need the fiberglass, but if it's a drywall opening, you have a transaction window there. The people come in, they check in, they have a passer there, some kind of ability to pass documents. They get buzzed in and they go through the next set of entryway systems. The whole key to this is making sure that what we put in or what somebody puts in matches what is there. As close as possible. Now our frames might not always exactly match what the existing frames were, but you want to match as close as possible. So you're looking at matching the colors, you're looking at matching the existing glass heights, you're looking for, if you had full vision doors before, you want to be coming back with full vision doors. If you had opaque panels below, and you want to be coming back with opaque panels below. And those opaque panels can be made of any finish. We can clad them in stainless steel. We can stain them. We can get them sent out to be finished. They can be painted panels. So it's taking the time to partner with somebody, whether it's us or whether it's an architect, to just make sure that when we leave, it looks as close to what was there before as possible.
Great. And of course, there's always some gotchas, right? And you've shared with us quite a few, things to watch out for, but unexpected complications is a big one that comes up quite a bit, where you do all this planning and then something inevitably happens. Why don't you share some stories?
The biggest thing that you need to consider in what we're determining today is that people have no idea how long this takes. Most of the glass is made to order. There's lead times with the glazing, getting the hardware. And so we're trying to do as best as we can at educating these people up front, but even as today, we're getting requests from customers that want to get projects in this summer. And, you know, we're up front with them that this is going to be a challenge. You know, your typical, if they decide to go with a glass-clad polycarbonate for a level 3 material, you know, we have one of the best lead times in the country, and you're looking at 6 weeks from the time that we order the glazing before we get it in our hands. It's made to order for that location. You know, somebody wants something that's custom painted. You know, we send our materials out and get those painted. Currently, we're running 3 weeks with our painter to get that materials back. So those are the challenges that I don't think people really expect. And then when you get into the construction process itself, not knowing what you're going to get into those walls until you actually, you know, remove the existing, because there's something already there. So is there patchwork that needs to be done? Do the floors need to be fixed? All those things need to be looked at with a contractor to determine what that scope of work is.
Well, anybody who's ever done a remodeling project in their house knows that, you know, as soon as you think it's a weekend project, it, you know, turns into a couple of weeks sometimes because you know, have forgotten to buy something or you haven't thought ahead. So part of, you know, the challenge is trying to think about all the things that could go wrong, right? And try to prevent them, so that, especially if you only can do this over a weekend or a holiday or something like that in the school, right?
It's either weekends, holidays, or, you know, during the summer. And right now, that's when currently everybody's wanting to get their work done, is in the summer. And a lot of people that got ahead of this a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, are well ahead of the curve. There's people today that are, you know, we're still fielding calls on a daily basis, and, you know, they haven't spent the time or done their homework to plan this out, and it's going to be a stretch whether they get this stuff installed by the time these kids get back into school. Mm-hmm. You know, some of them haven't determined even the final scope or the layout of what they want to do yet. That makes it a challenge.
So installing over a weekend or holiday is the most optimal time, though. Why is that? You
know, you just don't want to disturb, you know, two things. You want the work to be able to get started and then finish, and then you don't want to disturb what they're doing. We have seen some success with people that have got as planned as setting up a secondary entrance. That works at times, but you want to be able to try to get this stuff done in off hours as possible. You know, summer, winter break, holiday weekend.
Can you do it at night? Is it ever a simple enough job that you can do that?
Some of the stuff is done at night, but it's, you know, these typically aren't going to be like in some of our other market segments that we participate in. We come in, we install overnight, and it's a one-night install. These are typically, you know, 3, 4, 5-day installs.
For a custom barrier.
For a custom barrier where you're integrating, you know, you gotta remove the existing system, or the contractor has. We've helped work with contractors, coordinating, being on site, kind of more as a consultative role as they do the installation. Mm-hmm. So there's a multitude of things that we can do to help with this process. It's just the more people can get ahead of it, the more smoothly it typically goes.
Great. I've got another question from the audience before we have a couple case studies to get into. And the question is, are most of our clients installing just entryway improvements, or are they also trying to replace the first floor windows as well?
You know, we haven't seen a lot being done on the first floor windows themselves. Mostly what we're seeing is people are wanting to make sure they harden the access to the building, and that's securing how the people get in and out of the school. So we've seen some secondary entrances done. The main entrances are obviously the first place that they secure, but it's usually the entryway systems. They're wanting to control who comes and who goes from that school. I think the big issue or the big key is that when people looked at the size of these schools and the number of windows that are even on a first floor, and then the number of schools that are in an individual district, and then what the resources that are available, being able to secure all of that in one process.
I mean, realistically, something like that could get into the millions of dollars.
Yeah, real easy, right, and quick.
Mm-hmm. So we have a couple of case studies to go through before we get to questions and answers. And so we'll just run through those real quick and then get into the Q&A part. So Jim, let's talk about the Jewish community school that we did here in Michigan and what some of the challenges and solutions were that we came up with.
You know, the biggest challenge that we ran into there, it was an existing school. They had already had some security upgrades that they had done over the years. But we had to make sure that we had to integrate our products with kind of as relative ease as possible. You know, there was a lot of design considerations on how do you actually get the materials in the building. We were tight on space just to begin with, of getting the frames and the doors in there, because you want to make these as structurally strong as possible too, so you don't want a lot of joints and seams. How do you make sure without tearing apart the ceilings of the walls that this will stand up? That's, you know, this building in itself was close to 40 years old. So what people are building and designing today is completely different than what was done back then. So it was a challenge, but we were able to, through some modifying of our systems and working with a local contractor, and he did some work for us, we were able to, when it was all said and done, integrate everything, make it structurally sound, secure the building. We used aluminum frames and made those match, and were able to was able to secure the building.
So when you work with a contractor or an architect on a project like that, how does that working relationship work? Is it that, you know, all the communication is done with the contractor or architect and they handle the communication with the school, or do you get involved, or do we get involved, I guess, directly with the school?
We can do as much as is required or as little as required. You know, at times the contractor themselves is the main point of contact. They have the relationship with the school because they've been doing work in that school district, as an example, or the architect has been hired by the school, so we're working for the architect. I personally think that it's an advantage that you work with somebody that's done work in schools before. They know the ins and outs. They know what can be done and hasn't been done. So a lot of times we like to partner with that contractor or that architect and have him be the main point of contact. He's there. He's typically local in that area. He understands, you know, work requirements, code issues, any of those things. And then we fall underneath him and we support him in as much as he needs or as little as he needs. You know, it's really up to him. But we typically point out what are the requirements for our system, how is it going to function, and then he usually takes it from there.
But you look at the blueprints and the specs and all of that, from that all the way through the install and measurement.
Exactly.
And then even more recently, there's this large project that we're working on with the school district in Pennsylvania, where it's even more complicated than the previous case study. Why don't you talk a little bit about all of the things that we're coordinating there?
You know, we're coordinating 11 schools in a district, and we're doing all this work at once. It's going to be done over this current summer. We've already started the project. We were able to align the systems and the design with what they had for a budget, what they felt was a threat. We are shipping everything to a central point. They're going to distribute the materials from there. One of the more complicated jobs, we're actually going to provide the install on that one project. The contractor is going to handle the work on the other ones. They're bringing in a hardware integrator. He's going to integrate all the hardware into our systems and frames and doors. So this is probably as detailed and as extensive of a project as you can get just on the coordination point. We need to make sure that obviously if you're working with somebody and you're working on a project this large, every school themselves, the actual building is going to be labeled, then the frames on up, it can be sorted, it's organized, and that contractor can go to work without having to sort out what he actually got.
Right, right. Great. Well, it looks like we've got a couple of questions coming in here. So let's see. Question from Thomas. How much roughly is the 11 school project costing the school district?
I'd say that project, I know what our end is. I know roughly what the contractor is doing in there. They're doing some additional work in the school that we're not involved in. They're going to be framing some stuff and doing some stuff for our project. I would say that's probably close to a $500,000 project for the 11 schools.
Mm-hmm. So with all the different pieces
With all
combined.
the different pieces combined,
right.
You're talking hardware.
So it's not an insignificant investment to make.
No, but when you break it down by 11 schools,
mm-hmm.
it's still, it's still feasible when you look at it as 11 entryway systems.
Mm-hmm. Well, if anybody else has other questions, feel free to enter them into the question panel. Another question is, what advice would you give to architects or contractors who are getting started? What's kind of the number one thing that they should remember when they're beginning work on a project like this?
I guess my biggest recommendation is just to get ahead of it, to do your homework, determine what your level of protection is. I would, whether it's us or somebody that's reputable in our industry, I would spend the time and explain to them what you're looking to accomplish. And it can go a lot smoother when we find that at least the projects that we're involved in, if an architect or contractor calls us before he actually has the project, it goes a lot better, a lot smoother. The projects usually go quicker. Mm-hmm. They have all the things ironed out ahead of time, so that when that project goes out to bid and the contractors are bidding on them, or the contractor that has the job has the inside track because he's called us and, hey, what am I looking at here? What am I working with? What do I need to know when I'm putting this bid together?
Right.
That's where it usually goes better, and then they have the inside track.
That brings up another question, too, of one of our audience members of, how are these schools paying for these projects? Are they getting grant money? Are they doing millages? Are they, how do they fund a project like this typically?
We found that obviously there's a wide spectrum in school districts of where they're at financially. We have found school districts that have money available. We found people that have been able to raise millages to do things, but then we've also seen where people have put together budget money and tried to get it through millages, and that hasn't passed as well. Mm-hmm. Some of the private schools that we do have access to Homeland Security money. They receive grants underneath those, and those are, some of them we are the Jewish schools or whatever, because there is a threat there. Mm-hmm. They participate in that money and get those grants.
Right. And I think there was a state that we were talking to that had money coming from some kind of, was it a lottery settlement or
some? It was a lottery settlement, and
yeah.
Then there was one down there that I just read, was it in the Carolinas or whatever, they set $30 million aside for school security upgrades.
Okay.
So there has been some stuff being done on the state level where they're setting, if they have additional monies available, they're setting that money aside for the school districts, I'm assuming, to apply for. So that's something that can be looked into as well. But that's across the board, I'm assuming, with camera upgrades and, hardware and door security upgrades and, the full gamut.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we're almost out of time here, so we'll just go through the last couple of reminders and next steps. And if you have any additional questions, you can feel free to contact us we'll show you the contact information in a moment. So just a couple of reminders. If you've been on the Total Security Solutions website, there is a free checklist available called a security checklist for securing school doors and entryways. And there's some tips there for you in terms of how to measure and the different things to be aware of. It kind of goes over the tips that we gave you here in today's webinar. On this next slide here, we've got a list of all the different products that are available for bullet resistance, and this should help you if you're thinking about a project. These are all the different components that you might want to think about. We've also got a very extensive architectural resource center that's helpful for not only architects, but anybody planning a project like this. It's got spec sheets, it's got CAD drawings, all kinds of stuff available there. So if you are in the planning stages, it's really helpful to kind of go browse through there and look at all of the different things that might be available. And of course, at any time, if you have any questions and you're in any stage of your project, you can feel free to call us here at our 800 number that's on the screen. We also blog very frequently about school security and other bullet-resistant security topics. And we're on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and all the different social media networks, so you can connect with us there as well. We really want to thank you for being a participatory audience today. It was great to have questions throughout the presentation, and we hope that you enjoyed our interview-style webinar. We will be sending out the slides after this in an email in a couple of hours. We'll get you the latest version. And I believe there's a poll that will go out asking you if you have any feedback so that we can make this better in the future for you. So thank you again for attending, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.